Are you ready for Hallmark's first non-Christmas movie with actual magic? Featuring a sexy golem. Bet you weren't expecting that. I sure wasn't. Not to be confused with Gollum from Lord of the Rings. I wonder if there's fanfic out there about sexy Gollum. I bet there is. Disclaimer, I'm only mostly sure that this is the first non-Christmas magic movie, but if I'm wrong and you know it, please correct me in the comments. Second disclaimer, Hallmark did license a movie with witches and spells in 2015 called A Kind of Magic, but it's not a Hallmark original and it never airs on the actual channel. Also, I maintain that the franchise The Good Witch never has actual magic, at least in the movies and the first few seasons of the TV series. It leans very heavily on plausible deniability and herbs and intuition and the power of positive thinking. I want spells. So again, if I'm wrong and they do have spells in like the later seasons of the TV show, please let me know in the comments. And then maybe I'll finish watching it. In February 2023, Hallmark released a movie called Made for Each Other. And this movie is distinctive for a variety of reasons, but perhaps most interesting to me is the fact that it features a magical amulet. Now, Hallmark used to be a very conservative Christian network, but they recently changed CEOs, and while the new CEO is still maintaining Hallmark's general wholesome nature, like no premarital sex or anything, we can now have both magic and gay people. I made a whole other video about it. So this is Hallmark's first non-Christmas movie with magic, probably. But the other reason that this movie is notable is that it's weird. So let's walk through the movie and I'll explain. Spoilers, if you care. First, I will do a very brief recap of the overall plot from start to finish, and then I will go into some more specific observations. The main character is Rachel, and at the beginning of the movie, we see her as a child where she sculpts a perfect Ken doll-sized male figure, and the way they frame the shot and have the child hold the sculpture, it seems intentional to keep us from seeing if she gave him a butt. And when it transitions to Rachel's adulthood, we see that her life-size male sculpture has a towel around his waist, like covering his genitals. Why? Rachel, he's a sculpture. Did she make him really and she's kind of embarrassed about it? She could have just sculpted on like a fig leaf or a swath of fabric. She didn't need to add a physical towel. And why are her sculptures so shiny? Like even the Ken doll she made as a kid was really shiny. And I don't think a child fired and glazed that clay. The general premise of this movie is easy to describe. Rachel is a very talented sculptor who has lost confidence in her abilities, so now she just teaches. Her younger sister is getting married, and Rachel's mom really wants to set her up with a man so she has a date. So Rachel uses a magical amulet to bring her perfect man sculpture to life and begins dating him. His name is Clay. However, she's falling for a real human man named David, who is her sister's new husband's best friend. And he's also a stand-up comedian. Over the course of the movie, Rachel begins to rediscover her passion for sculpting, and with David's help and encouragement, she submits a piece to a showcase, which gets accepted. Rachel wins the showcase, of course. So Clay proposes, at the showcase, and then David shows up. He left his big comedy show to try and stop the engagement.
David.
No, it's Clay.
David professes his love. In the end, Rachel picks David, the human man. And she gives Clay, her golem, a new purpose to go follow his passion in life. Then Rachel and David kiss and are now a couple. Now that you know the general plot, on to some specifics. The core concept of this movie, the golem, is a Jewish myth. Even though the golems of legend are basically warriors and servants made out of clay who sometimes go rogue and just start killing. But the thing is that this movie is the exact story of Pygmalion. In that myth, A sculptor makes a sculpture of his perfect woman, and he loves the sculpture so much that Aphrodite takes pity on him and brings the sculpture to life. So the golem part, was kind of unnecessary, although it's also kind of the best part. The writer herself, Adie Blotman, is just so excited, like absolutely over the moon that she got to make her sexy golem rom-com, as she should be. I will make the argument that having a sexy golem makes about as much sense as the other sexy monsters that we have in pop culture. Like, if you look at the historical representations and legends of vampires and werewolves, like, those aren't sexy. Monster love has become a very popular erotic genre, and some of those authors have really dug deep into monster lore to find their sexy love interests. Over the course of the movie, we begin to learn that Clay, the sculpture brought to life, loves food.
It's the most amazing thing I've ever had. Have you had the lox with the hummus?
Not even on accident. Here.
I've already had 3. All this shopping made me super hungry.
Best dogs in the city.
These aren't made of real dogs, are they?
Trust me.
She didn't actually answer that question. Clay also begins modeling and cooking. He really wants to go to culinary school, and I don't know how he can do that with, like, no social security number or education history.
So, Clay, how's it going with the application?
Actually, I'm thinking about going to chef school.
Chef school? I think he means culinary school.
Culinary school? What happened to law school?
David, the human love interest, is a stand-up comedian, and his stand-up's not very funny.
Because when you're a kid and you quit something you don't like, everybody's all like,
Oh, he's just discovering himself.
It's also only about being Jewish.
you know, my family, of course, wanted me to be a doctor, but I rebelled against that Jewish stereotype and became a lawyer. If you don't know what Yom Kippur is, it's a day of atonement.
I will say, there are some Jewish stereotypes in this movie that I noticed, but I am not the right person to comment on since I'm not Jewish. I did look up some other reviews to try and get a sense of how Jewish people feel about the somewhat heavy-handed inclusion of Jewish stereotypes and customs and language. And I couldn't really find much. At the time I looked, there were just 2 reviews from Jewish-oriented publications. And they both did comment on the stereotype of Rachel's mom being like a busybody who keeps trying to set Rachel up with doctors.
Ethel says that you haven't called your son back yet, and he said the date went very well. You're not eating, so I made you a kugel.
Mom, I told you to stop setting me up.
Why don't you show, Andrew? Oh, I'm sorry, that would be Dr. Paff. Calling Dr. Paff. It's not a good sign when the younger sister gets married first.
But they did both seem to be genuinely delighted with all of like the Jewish language and the mentions of food. So I hope it's just me being cynical.
Chocolate rugula.
Around with a bag of arugula in your purse?
Your friendly neighborhood Rugula man!
Chocolate arugula, my favorite. The best arugula I've ever had.
Rugula are better than donuts.
Later, Rachel gives a wedding speech, and it's not very funny, but everyone just cracks up.
As you are opening your air fryer and monogram tea towels, just remember, the perfect gift is grandchildren.
Surprise, surprise! David helped her write the jokes. At one point, they say that David's last name is Cohen.
I'm David Cohen. I'll see you next time. Thank you.
And that's also the actor's last name. So do they just not bother coming up with a last name for David? Or is that like a weird coincidence? Rachel's busybody mom is played by Terrell Rothery, who I know as Dr. Janet Frazier from Stargate SG-1. David's also played by Matt Cohen, who played young John Winchester on Supernatural, the actual Supernatural, not the spinoff. When Rachel introduces Clay to her family, he needs a last name, so she does the old look around the room and name objects that she sees.
Clay, what's your last name?
Gold. Fish?
Goldfish?
Sorry, Goldfisher.
You know, like George Glass and Seth Plate, Pug Mugsley. I mentioned this before, but throughout the movie, Clay's love of food and eating gives him the desire to become a chef. However, Clay's obsession with eating would make me personally concerned that my magic golem had developed an insatiable hunger that could only be filled by human flesh. Through a wacky turn of events, Clay and David end up becoming roommates, so that means that Rachel spends even more time with David, and she begins to fall for him a little bit.
I can't seem to stop thinking about David. I like talking to him. He makes me laugh.
However, this is when we learn the horrifying truth.
Remember, you wished him alive? And I don't think he would continue to exist if he no longer was serving his purpose.
If Rachel rejects her golem, that means that he is no longer serving his purpose of being her boyfriend, and she is essentially condemning him to die.
If we're not together anymore, then he goes back to being a...
Exactly. Listen, golems were made for a reason. You take that reason away, that golem is gonna go away.
This creates a very dark spin on the whole thing. Of course, since I already recapped the whole plot, you already know that Rachel picks David, and when she does, Clay's like, well, better die now.
I guess I should take off this amulet then.
No!
And Rachel, quick tells him, no, don't remove your magical amulet. I am no longer your purpose. Your new purpose is to follow your dreams and make yourself happy.
Do what makes you happy. To follow your passion and then see where it leads you. To love again.
And there's a clap of thunder, so I guess God agrees. With the whole stand-up comedian subplot, I feel like this movie keeps trying to be funny and failing. In my opinion, the funniest scene in the whole movie is when Rachel is teaching her sculpting class and she asks them what they want to make, and this one guy answers,
What do you see when you look at this ball of clay?
Like maybe a dish from my remote? It's gotta be pretty big. I've got a lot of remotes.
Great.
I do like the acting in this movie. I also like how Rachel's actress handles the clay, the substance, not the fake man. She seems like she actually knows what she's doing, and it makes me wonder if it's just acting or if she actually sculpts or does pottery as a hobby. She's a terrible teacher, though. She gets so invested in doing David's class project for him, which is making a dog sculpture, that she forgets she's teaching, and she only realizes it more than an hour after the class has been over. Girl, people paid to be in your class.
Where's everybody?
Class ended an hour ago.
By the way, this is the exact scenario that Rachel made up to tell people how she and Clay met, since she couldn't exactly tell them that she was his creator.
I took one of Rachel's night classes.
He was having trouble with his vase, and I spent the whole class helping him.
So we got it in the oven and we stayed after class for hours talking.
Anyway, I really like the dynamic of David and Clay in this movie. I like the trope of the super dumb, handsome himbo guy with a heart of gold who befriends the cynical, sarcastic, romantic rival. You don't really see it a lot, even though I just referred to it as a trope. At Rachel's big showcase, Clay asks if the sculpture that Rachel made of herself as a child is also going to come to life.
This is amazing. Is she also gonna wake up?
If so, they can adopt her and name her Claychel.
Idea. If she does wake up, let's adopt her and name her Claychel.
I'm not sure if it's just the perspective, but that sculpture looks huge. So Clay could be a male model lawyer chef, and their adopted child could play in the WNBA. By the way, Rachel's showcase piece is a sculpture of herself as a little girl holding the Ken doll figure. Assets covered. Can you imagine being another artist at the big showcase at the end? Not only does Rachel win, but a male model proposes to her, and then she's got another guy running in to profess his love for her. Look at the people in the background. Some of them have completely stopped paying attention, but others are just staring. I would just be standing in the background, hovering near the free food because I love free food. My own weird little painting just totally forgotten as I'm stuffing my face, confident in the fact that no one is looking at me. Then the parents start arguing about their marriage.
What are you doing?
I love you, Judas, and I always will, but our kids are all grown up now, and I can't continue pretending that our marriage never had any bumps.
I really like this lady.
This is the most exciting exhibit we've ever had.
Clay was accepted to Harvard.
So I don't have to go to Harvard, I can go to culinary school?
How? With what documentation? With what references? When Rachel and David kiss, everybody claps. Everybody. Just look at all of these complete strangers, just watching them. I thought the movie would end with the kiss, but no, it ends with Rachel seemingly scrolling through her Instagram feed as an alternative to like a flash forward montage, showing that her sister has triplets, David finally got to do the big comedy show, and Clay is Chef of the Year. I guess her friends are posting a lot of photos of her and David for them to end up in her feed. Okay, the end. By the way, Hallmark also has a time travel series called The Way Home, but it seems more like a family-oriented version of The Time Traveler's Wife rather than anything else. I haven't watched it because it seems very sincere and not weird. But I did just want to mention it since I'm talking about magic and Hallmark. Is time travel magic? I say yes. There's no thesis to this video. I just want Hallmark to romanticize more monsters. More sexy monsters. But not ghosts. Ghosts are a cop-out. Don't you dare give me ghosts.